you had called Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day. And for me,
When was that?
you had a rally, I believe it was on Columbus Day, in which you referred to it as Indigenous Peoples Day.
I thought that was when you announced you're running as an independent.
Yeah, was that? I just checked. I just made sure that I had the statement correct. October 10th, 2023, the Examiner reported on you referring to Columbus Day as Indigenous People Day, saying that you spoke about your father's visit to Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in 1968. Gratefully, the renaming of Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day. It shows that our country is now ready to explore and to tell each other the untold histories of those dispossessed people who have previously languished on the margins, Kennedy said. Whatever you might think of such sentiments, it is not the stuff of Republican campaign rallies. I'm not a fan of the Confederacy by any means, but tearing down the statues unilaterally through activist efforts was terrifying. They not only did they tear down the statues through violent force without any kind of democratic process or legislative process, they tore down statues of Hans Christian Heg, who was a Union soldier fighting against slavery, wasn't even an American, didn't own slaves, and they tore down Frederick Douglass, who was a former slave, who's amazing and fought against slavery. When I see things like this, it's particularly worrying to me because erasing our history doesn't do anything but make us repeat it. It dooms us. So I'm curious your thoughts on ideas like this, what people would refer to.
First of all, I don't think I ever said we should get rid of Columbus Day and replace it with Indigenous People Day, but I've spent 20% of my career defending and representing the tribes in the United States and in Canada and Latin America, suing big corporate polluters who are destroying their land, suing governments who have stolen their land and making sure that they're treated fairly. And, I think it's important for us to be part of a community where we can recognize all kinds of people. We can recognize Italian Americans to whom that is an important holiday. And at the same time, we can recognize the indigenous people who were, made the ultimate sacrifice of one of the greatest genocides in history, and that, they're right. My father always believed that our country would never live up to its ideals if we didn't make some kind of amends, meaningful amends to the, to the group that was exterminated in order for us to settle in this country. And I think it's a good aspiration for every American. I don't think it should be a left wing or right wing. I agree with you about the statues. I don't think it's a healthy thing or any culture to erase its history.
So would you condemn Charlottesville melting down the Robert E. Lee statue? They gave it to the African American History Museum, and then got those horrifying photos.
I have a visceral reaction against the attacks on those statues. I mean, I grew up, in Virginia. I know that, there were heroes in the Confederacy who didn't have slaves, and I just have a visceral reaction against destroying history. I don't like it. I think we should celebrate who we are, and that we should celebrate the good qualities of everybody. If we want to find people who are completely virtuous on every issue throughout history, we would erase all of history. And values change throughout history, and we need to be able to be sophisticated enough to live with, our ancestors who didn't agree with us on everything and who did things that are now, regarded as immoral or wrong because they, maybe they had other qualities that we want to celebrate. And clearly Robert E. Lee had extraordinary qualities of leadership and I don't think that I wouldn't have done that.
You, so it was your announcement as running as an independent candidate. You said, it's a hopeful sign now for our country that we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. It shows that we're ready as a nation. It shows that our country is now ready to explore and to tell each other the untold histories of those dispossessed people who have previously languished on the margins.
Yeah, you have problems with that?
With changing the name of our holiday?
I didn't say we're changing the name.
But so
People are welcome to call it Columbus Day, but it's also called Indigenous Peoples Day.
It's not.
This country's big enough for a lot of different people.
Sure, but the idea of Indigenous People Day was literally to take the name Columbus away.
Well, that's your idea. It's not mine.
Well, the activists literally said they were changing the name of Columbus.
But that's not my idea. It's your. It may be, or maybe some activists who want to do that. But I feel like that the Indigenous people should have a day. If it overlaps, there's many holidays that overlap with each other, and that we shouldn't be taking away from one group to give to another. But I do think we need to make a larger commitment to Indigenous people because they have been systematically robbed and cheated, and we need to do what we can as a country to make sure that that there's some kind of amends for that past.
I agree that an Indigenous Peoples Day is fine, but it literally did start as a counter to Columbus Day.
Well, but that's your beef,
Absolutely, it is.
Right,
yeah,
I'm not. It's not the way that I look at it. So
I respect that you stand by it. I think for a lot of people, these are the cultural issues that we feel is existential. To have a holiday that we grew up with, to understand why it was good, despite bad things about Columbus, for sure, and colonization in general, we celebrate the good things. We try to condemn the bad and maintain the good.
It was an Italian holiday.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think and I think that's kind of the justification for or keeping it not, whether Columbus was a hero or a villain, but the fact that this is a way, like we have St. Patrick's Day for the Irish. It's an Italian holiday, and I'm not saying it should stop being an Italian holiday. And we can celebrate the contribution of the Italians to their country, and we can celebrate
then perhaps
contributions of the Indigenous people of this country.
Perhaps on the next speech you give, you can say, on this Indigenous Peoples Day and Columbus Day, we are here to say.
Well, I'm not going to let you write my speeches for me. But
well, I mean, the concern is if your worldview is shifted, that Columbus Day is no longer the day you're celebrating the counter protest. That says a lot about how you see the world.
Let me tell you something, Tim. I respect you a lot. But I think what I've tried to do in this campaign is to not get sucked into culture war issues that I consider distractions. I think the big issues that we should be talking about, which you started with, is the fact that 57% of the people in this country cannot put their hands on $1,000 because if there's an emergency in their family, and if you are in that cohort and the engine light comes on in your car, it's the apocalypse because you can't afford that mechanic. You're not going to be able to get to work, and you're not going to be able to pay your rent. Then you're going to end up on the sidewalk homeless, and you're going to be circling a drain. And what BlackRock wants is for us to ignore the contribution they've made and the Fed has made and all of these big Wall Street's made to this situation and keep us fighting about Columbus Day or Indigenous People Day. I'm not feeding into that. These are economic issues, and that's why I'm running. I'm not running to feed into culture war issues on either side. You can dispute these activists any way you want. I'm not going to get involved in that issue.
But my point is, I completely agree with you about BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, all of these companies, the foreign influence on our social media. Before it was TikTok, we had concerns about Saudi investors with pieces of.
Look, I'm more concerned about the NSA and Facebook. And the CIA scraping all of our information. Facebook, as much as the Chinese are scraping, posts about teenage girls' kitty cats. They are. We have all the things that Edward Snowden told us. That these companies are deeply, deeply embedded with the CIA. If you have an abuser who's outside of your house, it's scary. And if you have the abuser inside of your house, it's much more frightening. And I'm more concerned about the CIA and the NSA manipulating public perceptions, censoring us, propagandizing us, using these social media sites to do that, and I had them against the Chinese. Listen, if we're really concerned about the Chinese, here's what we should be concerned about. I've litigated against Smithfield Foods for years for polluting vast, vast landscapes in this country. Smithfield controls 30 to 40% of pork production in this country, and the landscapes in states like North Carolina, Iowa, all over this country, they're now 100% owned by the Chinese. That is a threat. The Chinese are buying our landscapes, they're buying our food, they're controlling our universities, they're giving billions of dollars to universities and scraping in information, high technology information. They're deeply embedded with NIH and making bioweapons with them. They are, they're the principal creditor now in every nation in Latin America because we're spending $8 trillion on wars and they're bombing bridges and ports and schools and universities. Over that same period, they've spent $8 trillion building ports and roads and schools. And they're projecting economic power abroad and we're projecting military power and they're killing us because of that. And, we ought to be actually dealing with the real threat from China and not about silly issues like TikTok.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.